Thinking Aloud. Conversations on the leading edge of knowledge and discovery with psychologist Jeffrey Mishlove.
Hello and welcome. Our topic this evening is past life regression and depossession therapy. My guest, Dr. Edith Fiore, is the author of a book called You Have Lived Before, A Psychologist Looks at Past Life Regression, and also a book to come out soon called The Unquiet Dead, A Psychologist Treats Spirit Possession. Dr. Fiore is a graduate of the University of Miami in Florida and has been practicing clinical psychology in Saratoga, California. Welcome, Edie.
Well, it's nice to be here, Jeffrey.
You've been practicing conventional therapy. You had a very conventional background as a psychotherapist, and as I recall, you were a behaviorist when you began practicing.
That's right.
And then you went through a process of transformation that led you into a field which is of great interest to me in my practice also, past life regression therapy, and then from there into depossession therapy. How did that happen?
Well, it all happened sort of by surprise, actually. I had no idea what I was getting into because I did not believe in reincarnation. I thought it was a fantasy. In fact, it didn't even enter my mind that this really was anything worth investigating. When one day a patient came in with a problem, a sexual problem, and I used a hypnotic regressive technique and took him back to what I thought was going to be an embarrassing event in the current life. And all of a sudden he started talking about being a Catholic priest. And I thought I'd made a mistake in interviewing the man. How had I overlooked this? And then he said he was Italian, and there was no trace of an accent. So I was really bewildered. And then when it turned out to be the 17th century, I thought, this man is making up a story. What is this? But anyway, I followed him along, and he went through his life. And of course, as a priest, he couldn't have sex and that sort of thing. And then he died of a heart attack at the age of, in his 50s. And then came back a couple of weeks later, completely cured of his sexual problems. And having been a therapist for many, many years before that, never would this sort of result happen so quickly. So I was very impressed with what a fantasy could do. But still, I didn't entertain the notion of using it. Then 2 patients later, both flipping into past lives, convinced me that this was something that would be very worth using on a regular basis. So I began to feeling very foolish about it, using it a little bit here and a little bit there, and now I've been using it for 10 years and feel very comfortable with it. It's very effective, as you know.
In other words, it works spontaneously into your practice.
That's how it started, and now I use it deliberately.
Yes. And currently, I understand that more of the work that you're doing is in the area of spirit possession than past life regression.
Well, it's about 50-50. It just depends what is the cause of the problem. If a patient comes in, I have found that generally there are 2 main categories that cause the symptom or problem. One would be a buried memory, either in this lifetime, but it would have to be extremely traumatic, and it would have to be a buried memory, or something from a past lifetime. That's one category. The other category would be possession by an earthbound entity. Now, possession is a very heavy-duty word.
Yes.
I'm not talking about demons at all. I'm talking about the grandmother that drops dead, that's frightened or clings to the person, and then before they know it, is within the aura and the body of the person.
But for you to even entertain a notion like that would almost imply that you've completely abandoned your psychological training.
Yes, it does seem that way. Actually, I find that I'm using very little of that earlier training. And I'm sure my professors would be rather horrified by what I'm doing, but it works, and that's been my whole approach. Actually, I'm not 100% convinced, even after using these techniques for 10 years, that there is such a thing as reincarnation. I'm not 100% convinced, or that there are spirits, but it seems very likely that both of these concepts are viable.
And so in your practice, what is it like when a person comes to you and they're possessed, or you think that they may be possessed? How can you detect such a thing?
Well, first of all, I very carefully interview them. And if I find that they have mood swings that are unaccountable, or if they do things that are uncharacteristic of how they really feel they are, or if they have gaps in their memory, or poor concentration, or particularly if they're tired, then I begin to suspect that maybe they have a spirit with them. You see, all of these things can be caused by other factors. For instance, tiredness can be due to allergies or just even staying up late at night. But if a person is chronically tired, and particularly if the onset of this behavior occurred after a hospitalization, or being in a setting where there are many spirits, for instance, hospitals, funeral parlors, cemeteries, that sort of thing, if they one day changed, then I'm very, very suspicious that this is what's going on. And it's a relatively easy thing to solve the problem.
A sudden change in personality would be indicative of that, or
very much so.
Some type of behavior which comes on as completely uncharacteristic of a person.
Yes, now that's if the possession occurs when the person is an adult. But if it occurred when they were a child, for instance, when they had their tonsils out at age 4, when I'm seeing them up here in 1986, when they are already, say, 40 or 50 years old, they've had that other person with them for so long that they feel that that's who they are. They can't tell the difference, and so their behavior just has some swings in it. It's not really that uncharacteristic.
Well, what if a person comes in and says to you, as many people might, "Oh, I'm just not myself today"? Does that mean anything? Or?
A little thing goes off in my mind. I mean, it's just one little clue. I see myself as really a detective more than a therapist sometimes, looking for clues, gathering clues with the patient as the co-detective. And then we put our heads together when we get enough of these clues and we figure out what's going on.
I think it's probably the case that this theory of spirit possession is the oldest therapeutic theory in the world. It would go back to biblical times or earlier, and yet in modern times most people in the profession, licensed psychologists such as yourself, would say that to entertain these theories is almost a form of delusional behavior itself. And yet you seem to get good results in your practice.
I get excellent results with this, and interestingly enough, my colleagues are very open to this. I actually presented a paper to a very austere group of hypnotists, the American Society of Clinical Hypnosis, and they were all very interested and asked many pertinent questions. So I was very happy that they were open-minded about it, finally.
I suppose one might say that whether or not spirits exist, whether or not reincarnation exists, you have a working model which is different than the conventional working model, and which maybe allows you to have therapeutic insights or therapeutic rapport, which is not possible using a conventional approach.
I'm not really sure what does the trick, but I just do see that it works consistently. It does seem to me very logical, though, that there are spirits, because, for instance, someone will say that they were fine until their father died, and then since his death they have found that they're driving the kind of car he likes, that they have a loss of temper, and he had a bombastic temper, and they've even started to smoke the type of cigars that he smokes. All these things were traits, and they don't realize what they're telling me when they're telling me these things at first. And then we actually get in touch with the father. I talk to the father and convince him to go, and as of that moment the person has changed. Now, it could be a very powerful hypnotic suggestion, but many times all of these clues were there long before they stepped into my office, you see.
I should suppose that it's the last thing the patient is expecting when they come to see you, that you're going to tell the father to leave.
Yes, exactly. And what I'm now finding is that in the majority of cases, and it's hard to know percentages, but I would say if I had to be pressed into a corner, that about 90% really want that spirit to be there at a subconscious level. And so I don't do a research with each case, but I have a hunch that if I did, I would find maybe even a higher percent, that this is really an invitation. So that when they were having their tonsils taken out, they were so terrified as a spirit out of the body that when this helping spirit came, they just clung to that helping spirit and invited that person to come back, sort of like a security blanket, but now it's 31 years later, you see. And down deep, they still want that loving, comforting person to be with them, and the other person is still in the caretaking role. And either one, at least the patient doesn't realize at a conscious level what's happened, but under hypnosis it becomes very clear. And then when the spirit leaves, there are great tears, and they miss the spirit. It's very interesting, and they had no idea the person was there consciously.
I think when people think about depossession or convincing a spirit to leave, we get images of the exorcist, you know, holding up the cross and demanding. You don't do it that way, though.
No, I don't do it that way because I'm dealing with a different type of entity, fortunately. I have come to believe in those other forces, the demons and that sort of thing. But I haven't had to deal with them, nor do I hope I ever will have to deal with them. I don't have the means to deal with that kind of spirit. But I talk to the person as another person. I mean, I even call him a person. I speak to the entity as a person. I try to imagine what this person looks like in my mind. And sometimes I start out very soft when I'm talking to the person, and it's sort of a gentle persuasion. And then I get to really laying a heavy trip on them. You know, if you really care about, you think you love this person, you're staying with the person because you love her, then if you really loved her, why would you want to hurt her? And I lay on a little of the guilt. And then, of course, offering them on the silver platter a beautiful life in the spirit world, and only going hand in hand with their loved ones. No way do we kick anybody out, because then we create a monstrous problem.
Well, how do you arrange all of this for a possessing entity that's been there for 31 years to have the loved ones come hand in hand and take them out?
Do you really want to know?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know for sure, but several of my patients have said that they can see an ancient Tibetan monk in back of me who orchestrates this. So either there must be rescuing type of spirits that arrange for the mother to be, the spirit mother to be there, for the spirit husband to be there. Because really all I have to do is say, your loved one is here, and they instantly change and see the loved one. Whoever I want is there. If I want a nurse to come to calm the person down, I have that. I have even had patients jumping because they got an injection to calm them down. Or if it's a rebellious teenager, I might have an attractive blonde girl, 15 or 16, come, and then he kind of perks up and goes off with her. So whatever I want, I seem to get.
You know, it's quite remarkable, because I had a similar experience the first time I tried this technique. It came spontaneously. I had a case in my office of it seemed to be possession, and I didn't know what to do. And I finally said, well, my spirit guides are going to come and help you leave. And all of a sudden the client's eyes changed, and she said, yes, I see them. Long beards, white robes, they're dancing away now.
Yes, you see. And I know that you've had a lot of experience with both past life therapy and depossession yourself, Jeffrey. So you understand that it's just a matter of asking and ye shall receive.
It's almost as if what's being brought to the profession here is more of, you know, an ancient shamanistic technique, in addition to the modern day behaviorist therapy. It's as if we start to wear several hats at once.
Exactly.
How about the past life regression work? How does it tie in with depossession?
Well,
if we reincarnate, as this therapeutic approach would imply, why aren't these other spirits also reincarnating?
Well, they've become stuck on the earth plane in the physical world because of their fears, their lusts, their confusion, because they were drugged when they died. So instead of going and making that natural transition to the spirit world, a certain percentage, and I have no idea whether it's 5% or 1% or 10 or what percent, but there are very many spirits here, but a certain percent stay. Now, as long as they're here, they can't reincarnate. They're either floating around without a body, or they're possessing someone, in which case they're actually in the body of the patient. Now, when they are released, they go into the light, and several have described that, or at least the patient can see them going, and then from that point on, they're in the spirit world, and then they come back, you see, then they reincarnate. The fascinating thing is, in very tricky cases, I've had to go into the past lives in which the two, the possessee and the possessor, have been together before, and then undo the bond that existed. In fact, I just worked with this before coming today to talk to you.
In other words, what you're doing is past life regression therapy on a possessing entity.
Yes, and or the patient to remind her or him of the connection, and then they let go of that subconscious holding, or they're getting even with the spirit. You see, what better revenge than to keep that person trapped on the earth plane? Because there's no worse fate for an entity. And so we have to go back and unravel that. And many times we find that they have murdered each other in many, many lives, switching roles. And then and only then can I talk a revenging entity into leaving. I'll say, well, you know, you've been killed by Betty 5 times, and you killed Betty 5 times. Now the score is even. Why don't you go on? By then, usually the motivation to stay is eliminated anyway.
It would seem when the cases get that elaborate that another way of viewing this, the religious implications aside for the moment, is that everybody has within them the capability to be a great novelist. And,
Yes,
and there are
exactly.
all of these incredible stories
Oh,
that
yes.
come out from people who would otherwise seem very ordinary people who would
That's right.
normally dream of these things.
Yes, and a lot of these lives are not particularly exciting or dramatic.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have that many celebrities from past lives or
Uh-huh.
well-known figures. They can just be very simple people.
Uh-huh.
So the stories are not something that one would ordinarily make up.
Mhm.
They're just, but they're very relevant. Now, in doing a straight regression, I call it a hand-in-glove sort of connection or relationship. If the person, for instance, has a phobia of heights, we often find that they have fallen to their death.
Mhm.
If they're overweight, they've starved to death, or maybe they've been raped, and therefore they don't want to be attractive. Or if they're very depressed, then they've done something for which they've never forgiven themselves.
Guilt.
Right,
in other
guilt.
words. Mhm.
And guilt sustains all of these symptoms at one level.
Mhm.
Now, sometimes it isn't necessary to get back to it, but if it's a tricky case, then it is.
Would you say then that one of the approaches that you use in past life work then is to find the source incident that led to the emotion that is causing a person to be stuck or to develop a symptom?
I don't necessarily have to go to the source of the emotion, but I go to the source of the problem. In other words, if the person has asthma, then we could go to the event causing the asthma, and we might find that they're choked, or they're drowning, or that they're being burned at the stake as a witch inhaling all the fumes, the smoke, that sort of thing.
And then the reliving of that experience somehow creates a release?
It seems to. Now, actually, that part is not at all understood by anyone. I really don't know what is the therapeutic process, what actually happens within the mind. Because sometimes the person can be completely cured by simply recalling it, as you would recall a meal that you had a month ago. In other cases, the person violently relives it. But as long as they can look at all the crucial aspect, then they're cured.
Yeah.
And it's a real cure. It's a lasting cure. It just does not come back. And often, those regressions don't just cure one thing, they cure a host of other problems as well.
What do you think of the implications of this work for the psychology of religion or for theology in general?
Well, I think it has very deep implications. For one thing, it supports the idea that we are immortal beings. That's the number one premise that we're dealing with, both with reincarnation and with possessing entities. That we never die. That's the one important factor here. That we do not die. The body is just a vehicle, it's just a shell that we use, so that the soul, or that we, are immortal, which is very comforting if we really believe that. So that, I think, is the number one relationship between this work and religions. Secondly, I think they've got to viewpoints have to take into account the fact that there is reincarnation, because this is not widely accepted among Catholic or Protestant or Jewish, most Jewish religions.
Although it was at one
Yes,
time
oh
in the
yes.
early history
That's
of
right.
all of these religions. Well, would you say that people in contemporary church leaders who are aware of your work, are they open or hostile? Or?
I haven't talked to anyone who's hostile to my work, but I don't know how many leaders of these various religions are really aware of what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Now, more and more my colleagues are, but as far as others, I'm not really sure.
You're basically a clinical psychologist working with your clients.
Yes, I go to my office every day. I see my patients every day, and then I go home, and right now I'm working on my book.
Your goal is really to heal your patients,
Yes.
not to change the
That's
world
right.
with your theories.
Yes, right. I'm just putting it out there, and that's why I have this need to write. Because writing gives people hope that they can be helped, because they've tried everything and they can't get helped. And because the cause has never been addressed.
Yeah.
You see, I feel that there are two ways to solve any problem. One is you can attack the symptom, which may work beautifully, but it may not be lasting, and also it may not work. And the other is to go after the cause.
Well, how has all of this changed your life? Have you become a more religious or spiritual person as a result of this work?
I wouldn't say that I'm more religious. I'm not really quite sure what that means, but I certainly have changed all of my spiritual ideas, because I was a complete agnostic for one thing when I started this, and I was a total disbeliever in reincarnation, and I really wasn't interested in it. I thought it was just sort of an archaic notion that came from India. I really didn't know much about it. I wasn't interested in it. And as far as believing in spirits, if anyone had suggested that mental illness or physical illness was due to spirits, I would think that they were very backward in their approach. So I have to kind of laugh at the position I've gotten myself into now. Now I feel like my mind is opening up. Sometimes I feel I wear blinders because I see things in these terms, simply because because as I said, it works, so I use it. But I personally now believe that we do not die. I believe that there is a spirit world, and I believe that there is reincarnation, but as I said, I'm not 100% convinced. But fortunately, I don't have to be.
Do you draw from any particular religious or spiritual sources for information in this area now?
No, I don't look for outside of my office for any understanding of what's going on. I get everything from the work I do with my patients.
And would you say that that work is evidence of reincarnation?
Clinically, yes. I don't have any other explanation for a person with a lifelong phobia, for instance, of heights, a fear of heights. Dreaming of falling when they're a child, screaming when they're in a car when they're 4 months old, going up in high places with the car. Always having this fear.
Having had the phobia from birth.
From birth, showing itself in many ways. Then doing one session, of course it may have taken many sessions to get to that one session, but doing one session in my office and walking out of my office without the fear and never having it again. So the only logical explanation is that this did happen, that there was a fall in a past life.
Well, as a person with scientific training, Edie, do you think that it will be or is possible to integrate this kind of an understanding with all of your educational background?
Well, my educational background, no, because my educational background did not address either. The word hypnosis was mentioned about twice in my
So even
PhD.
becoming a hypnotist, you were moving beyond your educational background.
Yes, exactly. So that as far as integrating it, I don't even attempt to do that. But as far as my understanding of what I'm doing and my ability to do it, that is really the only thing that I'm interested in at this point, because I want to perfect these tools to be even more efficient with my patients.
Have you looked at your own past lives then as a means of developing your abilities?
No, but that would be a very interesting thing to do. Maybe we could work on that sometime, because I know you're very skilled in these regressions also.
We talked earlier, though, about the bringing to the practice this shamanistic quality, and have you gotten in touch with some of that in the past lives that you have looked at?
Well, in some of my past lives, in many of my past lives, I've been a healer of various types, very interested in herbs, which accounts for my interest in herbs in this life. But also, one of my specialties, apparently, because I did it both in Egypt and also in the Mayan culture, was as a priestess, I would lie on an altar with an attendant, and I would leave my body consciously. That my soul would leave my body, and then I would heal people in a mind-to-mind way, which I think in a way I'm doing now, but without leaving my body. And then I would come back. Now that was very, very advanced compared to what I'm doing now, I feel. And actually this kind of thing is being done and is being taught in Brazil, which is fascinating to me. How to consciously leave the body, astrally project out and heal people while out of the body and bring it back consciously. So I use this in a kind of, well, in a very lax sort of way by doing this at night as I go off to sleep, wishing that this would happen and then hoping that my spirit guides will take me while I'm sleeping to help some of my patients.
Well, do you have any intuition, since we are now doing a live on tape TV program, and at some now moment at a future time there will be people observing, watching, and listening? Is there some way to integrate this psychic level of interaction, this shamanistic level, with the electronic media? Do you have any sense of that at all?
No, I really don't. Do you?
Well, I do. That's one of the reasons why I'm here. And I do. I have a feeling sometimes of connection with the audience. And when you talk about a very deep experience, like you just mentioned, I sometimes get little flashes in my mind. You know, gee, somebody out there is listening to that, and they really heard, like the words woke them up, even though they were being carried by an electronic media.
Well, actually, I did have that thought earlier. When I was talking about the fear of falling, I was thinking, I imagine that there are many, many viewers who have these phobias, because it isn't just that phobia, it's any of these phobias. You see, that's the whole point in any of this sort of thing, writing books, any interviews of any kind, is that you're reaching other people and you're giving them hope, because there is hope.
What if somebody who was watching now, listening to this, thought, my gosh, I'm possessed myself, that little thing I always thought was an itch in my ear is really Uncle Harry, or
All right, what to do?
Yeah.
Well, in my book that's coming out in April, I'm giving a whole technique of how to do your own depossession, but I can summarize it. First of all, you should address the entity, just speaking into the air. And you don't have to know who it is, and just say, convince the person that their own body died. That's point number one. 2, that they are here with you, that they're trapped, and that they have an absolutely wonderful life waiting for them. And 3, that their loved ones are here, and for them to join hands with their loved ones from the spirit world and to go into that light, which is right over there. Those are sort of actually 3.5 points. 1, that their bodies have died. 2, that they have a wonderful, wonderful life waiting for them, and they will be living in their own bodies. If they're a male possessing a female, this is going to be very enticing, because now they can be in a male body and vice versa. But it'll be a perfect body that will not age, will not wrinkle, will not deteriorate or have pain, and they can really live in that body. And then 3, that their loved ones are here, and for them to go hand in hand. So therefore, they can do it themselves.
And you find that people actually get results?
Yes, oh, definitely. And if it's tricky, then they should see a professional. Now, I know that you do it and I do it, and I'm sure that there are some others who do it.
There's an organization, the Association of Past Life Research and Therapy, which hundreds of professionals now and throughout the United States involved in this type of work. How about, do you think people can induce their own past life regression?
I advise definitely against that. Against that, past life regression or any regression, because they begin to bring up buried memories, repressed memories, and they get these memories half up and half down, and then they've got problems. So even with my most experienced patients, I definitely say don't do it yourself.
And I would gather that that also applies to the notion of taking popular seminars or workshops where it's done in a group.
Yes, I have very strong feelings that that is just a really bad idea, because I've had a lot of casualties come limping into my office as a result of those. Now, it could be that 80% are helped, 10% don't get anything, and the other 10 are hurt. I would never personally do a group regression myself.
Well, what do you think is the next step? You've gone through past life regression, spirit depossession. Do you see anything on the horizon?
For myself?
Yes, or for the field as a whole.
Well, what I want to do, and which is my fervent wish, is to get a magic wand. And my magic wand would be to become clairvoyant, so that I could actually see the past lives that are involved and also see the spirits that are involved. And that would be a beautiful therapeutic technique.
Yeah. Well, one would get the sense, you know, that we're moving in that direction. I saw in the San Francisco Examiner recently, it was in the Style section, a little article that said that psychotherapists are out now and psychics are in. So there does seem to be a trend in that direction that perhaps we can all look forward to. Well, Edie, thank you very much for being with us tonight.
Thank you, Jeffrey. It's been lovely.
And for those of you who have been here viewing with us, thank you also very much.